Expanded Perspectives Classic Rewind. Hey everybody, and welcome to Expanded Perspectives Classic Rewind, the show where we replay or re-air some of our favorite segments and interviews we did in the past because some things deserve a listen to more than once. I'm your host, Kyle Filson, and on today's show, we're going all the way back to November 11th, 2013, when Cam and I talked about the Rock Apes of Vietnam, as well as 4 out-of-place objects. Now, you might be asking yourself, Kyle, what in the heck are you talking about? Rock Apes of Vietnam? Now, almost everyone knows what Bigfoot is, or Sasquatch, but not nearly as many people know about the BAtutut, or Rock Ape. Now, sightings of these mysterious creatures by American troops in the jungles of Vietnam throughout the course of the Vietnam War were surprisingly numerous, with many witnesses giving extremely detailed accounts of these sightings. Now, one particular hill in Vietnam was the site of so many rock ape sightings that it became known as Monkey Mountain. While no corpses of these strange creatures were ever recovered or any clear pictures taken of them, the fact that sightings of them were so widespread and common throughout the war makes them worthy at least of a conversation. After that, we talked about some out-of-place objects like the Coso Artifact, the Aluminum Wedge of Aiud, and the Antikythera Device, and of course, a Texas favorite, the London Hammer. So without further jaw-jacking, let's get to it. You're listening to Expanded Perspectives Classic Rewind. Halfway through the season, I think I just started watching like the first 5 minutes, and I don't watch the rest because they never find nothing.
You are no help whatsoever when it comes to that, are you? Like,
No.
what the hell?
The kids really like it, though. They love it.
Jack Link's jerky. That's how the boys told me I could catch a Bigfoot whenever I was
they
talking
think
to
that's
the
his
boys.
fair food. You give him beef jerky. Well, he's only mean to you.
If you try to take it away from
Right,
him.
and pull a prank on him. Right, if
Yeah.
you just share it with him, he's cool, man.
He's down with that. He's cool, yo. Okay, what I'm going to discuss for this Veterans Day, which made me think of it, was the Vietnam Rock Ape, which there's been a lot. And when I say a lot, there has been several accounts given by Vietnam veterans that had seen things or encountered things while in Vietnam.
Now, weren't a lot of these veterans, though, just stoned to the gills on LSD and weed and stuff?
Man, I've watched a lot of those same movies you've watched, and it looks like that. But you know what? I wouldn't be hating on them if they were.
No.
I bet they had some.
What about with Agent Orange, like makes you start having hallucinations?
I don't know, but when I read you this story right here, it's a pretty wild story, really.
So does it have a cool name other than just the Rock Ape?
Well, okay, they actually call it, in Vietnam, it's called the BAtutut.
The BAtutut.
BAtutut, which actually stands for forest people.
Oh, okay.
It's kind of in Vietnamese, and of course, I'm sure my Vietnamese accent's a little off. You could actually call it BAtutut.
I don't have any idea.
I don't know, but I'm going off of that whole thing. There was actually a book that's got several of these articles written in it, and it's called Very Crazy GI, Strange But True Stories of the Vietnam War, and it's written by Craig P.J. Jorgensen, and he was a Vietnam veteran, and he's put a lot of these in here.
And you can get this on Amazon
Yeah,
and
I'm
stuff?
sure you can find it on Amazon.
Right on.
He actually tells a story that he actually had a sighting in Vietnam of a short, red-haired, hairy, upright anthropoid that was running around out there. He called it, and the soldiers in the Vietnam soldiers in that area called it rock apes. I'm assuming it's because they saw them a lot in the rocky crags and the mountains of the areas around there.
I mean, I'm not familiar with the wildlife range of what am I thinking of?
Of Vietnam, yeah. All the creatures. Come on,
it's a type of ape with red hair. I can't think of the word.
Orangutan.
Yeah, could it have been one of those? I mean, or do they not live there?
How long?
I don't know where they live.
How long have you known me?
A long time.
Have I ever studied primates or orangutans that live in Vietnam?
No, but I'm just saying,
I mean,
if
asking?
orangutans are known to be in that area and then some guy sees one, something red haired, I mean, I would think it was that.
That was the first thing that I thought of whenever you bring that up. And I've actually got it jotted down in some of my notes.
I'm not picking on your story. I'm saying I think most sightings of everything is just misidentification.
Well, you bring that up because I looked up trying to figure out the sizes of what they actually said that rock apes were. Some of them were small. They actually saw like 3-footers. The story
those are obviously juveniles.
The story I'm about to read you is about a 7-footer.
Whoa.
Yeah. I don't know of anything that's 7 foot tall in Vietnam. No. I mean, certainly not the people. So, I mean, you know what I'm saying? What the heck is that big in Vietnam?
Yeah.
Not that I'm a specialist in the Vietnam critters, but
yeah,
I don't know. But what made me, and I'll get into that after we'll read and discuss this story. But what made me think of it was when I first started thinking of the rock apes, I instantly thought about the Sumatran orang pendek. Right. Because they talk about their small, red-haired, little, and they, alleged to look maybe a lot like an orangutan or something like that. So if you want to find this story, folks, if you want to jump on and go along sometimes, if you go to beforeitsnews.com is where we got it from. It actually comes from a website before. It's called stancourtney.com. So I'm sure Stan's the man that wrote it. This was originally published. This actual excerpt from this whole thing on Before It's News was originally published on phantomsandmonsters.com, which is Lon's website. But see if I can do my best to read y'all something to make it entertaining. Here we go. It was in 1969. I was on patrol one evening, just before dark in the North 2 Corps in Vietnam. We were returning to the hill when we encountered hostile fire. The squad was caught off guard, so we used what cover was available. The fight had been going on for only a few minutes when movement caught my eye. Through the thick vegetation, I saw what I thought was a large man breaking cover from behind my left side. As the thing ran past me, I realized it wasn't a man, and I was not really sure of what I was seeing. The thing was about 7 feet tall and had an enormous build. Though not completely covered with hair, the thing had reddish-brown hair covering a good portion of its body. It had covered about 30 yards very quickly, passing within just yards of my position, when it got hit in the crossfire. The thing stumbled once or twice, but never fell. All of a sudden, the enemy broke and ran. One even left his weapon behind. They were yelling something, but none of us ever knew what it was that they were yelling. We slowly regrouped and made sure no one was wounded and discussed what we thought we had seen. As it was getting dark and there were hostiles in the area, we decided to get back to the hill. That night, we heard several howls sounding very similar to the ones that you have recorded, coming from all over the place. Some sounds like there were just outside of the hooch, and others sounded more than a mile away. There were all kinds of sounds from whines to growls to sounds that sounded like barks. Needless to say, no one slept that night. The next morning, all of us that were on the patrol decided to try and track this thing. It took a lot of talking to get the tops to let us go looking for it, but after hearing the same story from the whole squad, they decided to let us have a chance to bring it back. We returned to the area and found a blood trail leading into the jungle. We trailed it for quite some time. Then we found the body of an enemy soldier that had been almost torn completely apart. We did not know exactly what happened, but I have a good notion to what may have happened. We basically ran out of that area back to our hill. The rest of the time we were in Vietnam, I never heard the sounds or saw anything like it again. The talk of what we had seen spread very quickly, and some of the locals called it a name that I can neither pronounce or remember, but the translation, if I recall, was stench monkey or foul monkey.
BAtutut.
BAtutut. I can't remember for sure. What I do know is that it bothered me so much that I transferred from there to a job on a helicopter so I wouldn't have to be in the jungle anymore. After returning home to Alabama when my tour had ended, I occasionally heard sounds that reminded me so much of that encounter. It had been years since I had left Alabama and moved to the west central Illinois. I seldom thought of that day in Vietnam or the things I heard and saw. The recording is exactly what I heard over there. I could close my eyes and still hear the howl in Vietnam. Regrettably, I have mixed feelings about discovering your website. Relieved that someone else may know what I went through, frightened that there may be something in the area where I now live. I realize that you are interested in pursuing this creature or one like it, but let me warn you from someone who has seen it, what it is capable of firsthand, don't. And that comes from StanCourtney.com. What it is, it's talking about some of the sounds that you had played for us and some of the howls and stuff.
Whooping and stuff?
No, yeah. So apparently this guy actually saw something large.
Yeah.
And this is going against the other things that we had discussed.
And it dismembered somebody.
It jacked up somebody while it was kicking it around over there, yeah.
And it was shot?
He says it took a couple of hits.
Is that the blood trail they were following?
He was trailing it, yeah. They just, man, yet again, it goes back into that thing like we discussed with Linda whenever she was talking about the werewolves.
Yeah.
It seems like you hit them, but it never kills them.
No, it's not the first time I've heard somebody
they just wear it.
Something like that, and they just keep on rocking.
There's another one on here I'm going to read you right quick, folks.
Okay.
A man named Steve Williams sent this in, and it says, while at an Army military police school, my brother-in-law, Craig Miles of Boise, Idaho, met a Vietnam veteran that recalled a low-altitude Special Forces drop into the interior during 1967 and 68. It was the middle of the night, and there was no villages for 15 miles. It says, for a period of 3 nights, they heard choking and gurgling noises. On the first day, they found the upper half of a decomposing Bigfoot-like creature. It had been blown in half by something, but not them. This was apparently not the noise they had heard, a mate possibly. This was the speculation that was circulating. They could see into the body cavity, spine, lungs, and such. All was crawling with bugs. There was shorter hair on the head, the eyes sunk back 1.5 inches from the brow line. It had long arms, very large and long fingers, and one hand was still wrapped around a branch. He didn't say what color it was, but he did mention that it had a flat nose. If the creature had its legs, the estimated height was around 8 feet tall.
Holy cow.
There was no sign of the lower half of the body. They were able to see the teeth, all flat, well-formed molars except the canines, which were longer and pointed. Seemed adapted to living in the forest with long arms and fingers, or perhaps just builds night nests like gorillas sometimes do. I don't even know what to think about that.
Wow.
These are guys that have come back, and even guys that are telling these stories of what they have seen. I mean, at this point here, I understand, this didn't happen in the States. It's not like you could have easily grabbed what was the remains and took it back in to be checked. I get that. But still.
So I guess there was like a firefight or something, and like mortar round,
or maybe there was a landmine. Maybe there was a landmine somewhere that blew the legs off of it. I don't know what happened, but it sounds like they got a really good look.
Yeah.
At what it was. These are stories like this man here. I wish that somebody would follow up, would really go discuss it, would really go talk to the people that, this is a good story.
The people that write into this.
Well, yeah, the guy that was telling that story, that would be a really great story to listen to, or to actually talk to him and be like, can you describe it well enough for like a police sketch artist to sketch something up to what you saw? Or has it been so long now that maybe your mind's kind of playing?
Man, I'm with you. That would be very interesting if you could find a book or a compilation of all these stories. Like I said, I've heard, I heard some stories that happened during Vietnam, but I want to say like they saw guys that were like glowing.
You told me a story. This has been a while back about a guy seeing what that actually looked like it had wings. Like when it took off, remember? Like left and took off, and it looked like it had wings. I mean, that's nothing like what we're discussing.
No, I know. This was not Sasquatch. I'm talking about just other stories during Vietnam. I even heard a story of like a pterosaur or something flying around. It reminded me of Paul Nation because that's Papua New Guinea?
Yeah, yeah.
And so, that's what it reminds me of. I don't know if it had bioluminescence or not, but I remember reading somewhere about these things that they saw flying and completely silent. You could just hear them when it flew over, and they looked like large pterosaurs. And then also I said I read something about some glowing men they saw. Like it was like a Sasquatch almost, but like it was glowing, like orange. I don't know. I'd have
I'd have to research.
Yeah, that is well, and there was that one story that you and I had both read about the Japanese soldiers in New Guinea were clearing out those the caves and had flushed a bunch of pterosaurs out.
Yeah,
that's a pretty crazy.
Now, was that on like an island out in the Pacific, or was that?
I thought it was in Papua New Guinea where it actually happened.
Oh, it was Papua New Guinea.
I don't know. We're gonna have to talk to Paul about that for sure.
Right.
When I got carried off onto the whole rock ape thing is when I got to looking up the orang pendak. All right, and that's for people that aren't familiar with the orang pendak. Actually, is from the island of Sumatra. Now, some of the very first rock ape stories we're talking, like I told you that when I first was researching them, and you had talked about what you had seen, were like 3-footers, and that's what made me first think of it. Then I found this where they were talking about large creatures, very, very large creatures. So I was like, okay, maybe it's not the same thing that we've been looking into, but the orang pendak sizes are roughly 30 to 60 centimeters tall. Excuse me. So they said this is what they say that they usually get to, 85 to 90 centimeters. Now, this is coming from Debbie Martyr. She's been studying the orang pendak for 15 years. And she says by her studies, they are usually 80 to 90 centimeters tall, sometimes 1.20 meters tall. So they're not real big. What are we talking about? So we're talking 3 to 3.5 footers.
Right.
And now here's the really strange thing, though. And some of these, Debbie reports that they are dark gray or they're black with like speckled and flecked parts of gray hair in them. But that's just one. Some of the other reports that I've found, they were like a reddish brown, blackish brown, golden browns. Gray to brown. It pretty much seems like from a gray to a black, they cover this range of browns and reds and golden colors. So it does sound a lot like an orangutan.
Yeah.
In the size and in the color.
The size fits it exactly.
Long-armed, long fingers.
Yeah,
folks, I'm not saying it's an orangutan, but it does fit that description. So it makes me wonder, it's almost like it leads even more credence to me believing that maybe the orang pendak, I can buy into something 100% that's maybe a 3-footer, 3.5-footer that's hiding around up there in the mountains.
Yeah, who's to say that the orang pendak is just an undiscovered, very rare ape that's living in that area? It's different than the orangutan.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Because they discover new monkeys all the time. What was it, the one that they discovered just a couple of years ago? The Bondo ape?
Mm-hmm. That is a creepy.
That's in Africa,
chimp,
but
yeah.
I think they'd had pictures of it for a long
Only
time.
from the 90s. Only from the 90s did they ever get photos. They've been told about it for quite some time.
Right. So, and now they know it's real, and they've actually got a specimen.
Mm-hmm.
I think they found a dead one, or they shot one. Heck, I don't know.
Yeah, I think they've got not a good
But you know
specimen.
what I'm saying?
I think they got one.
Sumatra's not very populated, so maybe this is just another ape that's living there. It's nothing to do with Bigfoot or anything.
I had actually heard, and I can't think of where I actually heard it from, but that they were saying that they believed that they were very close to proving that the orang pendak was real.
Yeah, it's probably real. In fact, I think they discovered a new monkey or something in Vietnam.
They discovered 3 new creatures in Vietnam, I believe. But
I want to say one was some kind of primate,
may
like
have been
a monkey or something.
Well, and what's funny is some of these stories, like I told you about the very crazy GI story, he actually talks about seeing some of them in the trees, these smaller ones in the trees. One was a black one that it stayed behind to kind of defend its group as its group left, and them telling that story. Now, of course, I wasn't there. I don't know what but if you listen to the story, it sounds like a troop of primates that was fleeing an area under duress, and one stayed behind to try to slow them down or fight or whatever it was. The orang pendak has been seen a few times in trees in Sumatra. They're not known to live in trees, but they have been seen there. So it kind of leads more for me wanting to lean more towards, I can understand why people could get behind that. I'm not saying that Bigfoot's not real, because after talking to Gary and Mike, both on air and off air folks, they really tied a lot more down for me to really think, you know what, there's something.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Just like we've said before, I'm sure most cases are misidentifications, but there's always that small percentage that you just can't explain.
Yeah.
To me, there's just too many unexplained events for there not to be more to the story. And then you look at almost all the ancient cultures where these things are seen, it goes back forever that they've seen these things. This is the Almas, or this is the Sasquatch. And so why would all these cultures be making up this story? So,
And MU did a really good story on Zana on this
Oh, really?
This past Thursday. She did it. They did a good story that they,
Man, we almost did it too.
I know,
about a month ago.
Yeah,
In fact, I even put a blog up like a month ago on her. We were going to record and we never did. I know why we didn't. I remember right before we were about to record, I think America or something released a story on it. We were like, man, it's a good thing we didn't record that.
Is that what it was?
I think so.
I can't remember.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't.
The Coral Castle.
It was the Coral Castle. We were going to do some work on.
The Coral Castle, I had
Edward Lee Scaldron or whatever his name is.
I had a bunch of stuff written down and all linked to the Coral Castle. And when they did it, we didn't do it.
Yeah. There's a lot of recordings we do that we just never release.
Yeah.
We almost did one on Zana.
But Zana was another one and they did, and it was only, I'm trying to think right off on the spot, but something about the DNA that they studied her DNA just recently.
Well, yeah. I mean, for people that don't know, Zana is apparently an almas. An almas is a type of European Sasquatch that lives like in southern Russia, what is now Georgia and stuff. And I don't know what year this took place. I think it was in the 1800s, but
the end of the 1800s. I want to say 1870.
Right. They captured this almas.
Maybe before that. I think she died in the 1890s is when actually she died.
They captured her, and she was a female almas, and they habituated it, and they tamed her, and they had her doing chores for them.
And they also had her for a sex slave.
Several of the men with her. Actually had children with her.
Yeah.
And some of them survived. I mean,
I think 3.
I'm trying to remember the guys. I know for a fact she had like 2 sons, and they said that, they had really big jaws and they weren't the best looking.
Well, and they were in the emu. You'll have to listen to it because I'm going blank right now. But it's one of those things where they checked it and that she didn't have any more. They didn't have any more Neanderthal DNA than what you would think, like than me or you. So it wasn't like they were maybe a Neanderthal throwback or something like that, but they did have some other DNA in them that they couldn't quite put their finger on. So maybe she's closer to a primate.
Oh, what are you saying that they were able to exhume her body and test the DNA?
They tested the DNA of her son's skull.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I haven't heard that one yet.
And what is it called? The Dyatlov Pass. You remember the story about the UFOs in Russia? The one UFO where all those hikers went missing and then they found them.
They were like aged.
Yeah. You need to listen to the latest MU. I know now I'm doing an MU commercial, but you need to listen to it because as much as you like that story, they do a whole thing. There's a man that actually just finished writing a book on the whole thing, and he actually went to Russia 3 different times, stayed over there, studied it, interviewed the one hiker that got sick and came back, and his people went ahead and went on. He interviewed him just months before he died.
Really?
The whole thing's we got to get the book. The book is going to be awesome.
That's awesome.
Hey, let me tell you this right quick.
Okay.
While we're still on this whole crypto thing, let me get to this. I found a few more crypto things. I was looking for some that might be, we've all seen the pictures on the internet of like the giant camel spiders and stuff when they were over there in Iraq and Afghanistan, and they look like they're as big around as a tire and things like that. So I just started searching up crypto stuff in the areas that we've been occupying for, thinking of veterans. I wanted to think of something up like that. I only found 2 really interesting ones. One's from India. Nothing really going on over there. But it's called the Buru. And it actually says there's an alarm.
It's called the what?
The Buru. B-U-R.
Nibiru?
Not Nibiru.
That's the 10th planet, man.
Or the burrow. That's Eddie Bravo's monster. It said it was a large or giant. I don't know if those were 2 separate things, but
catfish.
Aquatic reptile that's said to live in the Zero Valley in India.
It's a catfish. Come on.
No, they say it looks like a giant monitor lizard.
Really?
Yeah, that's what they're claiming.
How big?
That they didn't. There's not a lot of information on some of these things. It's almost just kind of like it was a tail and somebody took it down and kind of did a little study on it and stuff like that.
Okay.
The other cool one, though, was from Pakistan. And it's Pakistan's version of the Bigfoot. Basically, it lives in the mountain regions.
Pakistan has a Bigfoot?
Yes, it lives in the mountain region area of Pakistan.
Wow.
And it's called the Barmanru or the Badmanus. I'm serious. The Badmanus. Yeah. Yes, that's speaking of cool names. It's like Baddmanus, Bad M Anus.
Wow.
But what's funny is
it's like a lowland abominable snowman because Pakistan runs right into
the Himalayas.
Yeah.
Well, that's what they're saying is it falls between the almas of the Central Asian mountain range.
I got you.
And the
what
Himalayas.
The heck's the name of it again?
The Barmanu or the Badmanus.
man, I got to learn these and add these to my repertoire.
Exactly.
And the BAtutut. I mean, that's two new.
But here's a really cool thing, and I want to get this paper. Of course, you're going to have to freshen up on your French. There's a Spanish zoologist. His name's Jordi Magraner, and he lives in France. And he did the very first known research from 1987 to 1990 on this Bodmanus.
Wow.
And he actually wrote a paper. Now, I would love to give you the name of that paper, but my French is less than pathetic, so it's probably not something that I could be shouting off and chiming in about, but it's something that I wish there was I'd like to read about. I'd like to know what he's found there, because just like what you brought up, it's actually resting in between the Himalayas and Central Asia. Maybe there is something going on there, man.
Well, Lloyd Pye is a big proponent for there being different bipedal, whatever they are, cryptids that change their appearance and size and stuff based on
at will.
What? Yeah.
No.
Based on where they live. In other words, like you were saying earlier, the Sumatran is the orang pendek, or if you go to the Himalayas, it's the abominable snowman. If you go to the Pacific Northwest, it's the Sasquatch. If you go to Florida, it's the skunk ape. You know what I mean? Like they change based on like their territory, which makes sense because, you know, that happens with animals that we know of. I mean, like white-tailed deer in South Texas are completely different than white-tailed deer in Alberta.
True. So I guess that's what I was getting at, is when it gets colder, they need to be bigger, correct? And when it's hotter,
That's what it seems like.
Doesn't it need to be smaller? Isn't that what it is? I don't remember how that works.
I don't know. I know that animals that live on islands usually end up getting larger for some reason.
Yeah. And that goes back to like the hobbits of Florence.
But they're smaller, right?
They're little bitty, yeah. That's what they're saying. Like mammals get smaller and reptiles get larger.
Yeah.
Remember they always, like, I think on that same thing, they found like elephants that are like 3 foot tall.
That's awesome.
A bunch of tiny elefantes. Yeah. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed it. That was something it came to mind whenever I was looking through all this stuff this week. I thought I'd like to read a couple of stories.
It's a good call with the Veterans Day things.
I'd just like to read a couple of stories about it, because it's just, I'm still fascinated by the whole thing that there are so many sightings, just like, and that's kind of what I want to wrap this little segment up with right quick, guys. I know I've been rambling and going wild with it, but here's the thing. You've got sightings in Vietnam. We've got a man that studied this now in Pakistan. We've got it in Sumatra. We know it's in Asia. We know it's in the Himalayas. When are they ever going to finally take it serious and somebody really devote a little more study to it? We like to joke about finding Bigfoot, and everybody likes to give each other a hard time about Bigfoot, but seriously, there are so many cases now from around the world that it really needs some serious study. It really should be something that
I think most academics are scared to touch the subject because they're afraid of being ridiculed and laughed at. And so that's, it's becoming more mainstream. So eventually I think the tides are going to change.
I certainly hope so, because there's so many cases and so many, I would like to say reliable. I can't, because I don't know of all the cases around the world, but there's a lot of people that have really given some good stories about it. So I really hope that it starts making a change now. And I hope that people look at it a little bit differently instead of just laughing and taking it as a joke. There's a lot of more information about these creatures all around, really.
Yeah.
Well, I hope y'all enjoy it. I hope I didn't bore anybody to death.
I think it's neat.
That. All right. Well, I'm going to have to go get me a drink. I'm a little thirsty now.
Me too.
All right. Let's wrap it up, and we will be back shortly. Wait, hold on now. Wait a second. What are you coming back with? You're not getting out of here that easy. What are you doing next?
My top four artifacts that are missing through time. They show up in places where they shouldn't be.
So this is going to actually show
like a Casio keyboard that was found in 2 BC.
Nice. What is that keyboard? Looks like a guitar. You know what I'm saying?
I don't know, but that is the coolest instrument there is.
I'm so getting one. Rock me Amadeus. I don't even think it was in that video, but I'm going with that whole deal.
Yeah, they're really popular in the 80s.
Yeah, that is. Yeah, sorry, we're dating ourselves, but that's hilarious. Yes, I love it. All right, yeah, let's wrap this puppy up. Let's go grab us a quick drink, and y'all go grab a drink or do whatever. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back with the top 4 anomalous objects. right, everybody, we are back, large and in charge and looking for chickies. All right, Philly, you were talking about how you're going to bring us out something crazy, some out-of-place artifacts. What are you going to hit me with this time, brother?
Yeah, tonight I'm going to get into my top 4 favorite out-of-place objects.
Because, you know, I'm a big history buff now.
Yeah, oh, I know. And we haven't done anything in history in quite a while.
Yeah.
So I figured I'd bring something up in history since you did crypto.
Yeah, do it. Let's do this.
An out-of-place object is an object that exists in a place where it's impossible for it to exist. Like, it doesn't make any sense.
An out-of-place
and
object.
I love it.
That'd be like...
now, before I get started, I'm going to put a disclaimer here. Okay, now look, people. I am not a geologist. I am not a professional scientist. I'm just bringing this. This is an entertainment
Are you an
show.
archaeologist?
No, I'm not. Okay. So some of these artifacts that I'm going to bring up, there's, of course, a lot of controversy around them. So there's going to be just as many people that, or, you know, different websites that say it's fake, and there's other ones that say it's real. And so we don't really need to get into that. If it's not 100% real or you don't believe it, you know, don't bust my chops about it. I'm just bringing the information there.
I'm going to tear you up.
Anyways, there's several of them, and you can look at them, and I'll put links to all of them in the show, and there's tons more. These are just my 4 favorite. The first one, now I don't know if you know, but you probably know some of these. You may know all of them. I don't know. The first one.
I don't know. I'm a pretty smart guy, Kyle.
Well, I don't know about that.
Okay.
The Coso Artifact. You ever heard of this?
No, I have not heard of Coso Artifact. Sometimes
Artifact.
I don't like whenever you just blindside me with stuff.
Not the Lee Corso Artifact. The Coso Artifact.
Okay, hit me with it.
Okay, in February 13th of 1961, Wallace Lane, Virginia Maxey, and Mike Mixel were out looking for geodes for their rock shop. They have a rock shop called like Rock Hounds, Gems, and Gift Shop. They had a gift shop there.
Okay.
And they often went out and did this. And, well, they were out searching about 6 miles north of Olancha, California.
Okay.
That's where they were doing these rock searching. And after they normally sell geodes. You know what geodes are?
Yes, sir.
Everybody's seen them where you crack them in half or cut them in half and it's got crystals and stuff on the side. And so they were out collecting these geodes, and they collected, you know, a couple fossils, a couple geodes, and they threw them in a sack and they went home. No big deal. They do this all the time. Well, the next day, Mixel was cutting these geodes in half, and fairly into the process, he totally ruined a brand new diamond saw blade while cutting one of these geodes, or what he thought was a geode, in half.
Okay.
You know, so he was like, what the hell? Well, he looked at it, and instead of it being hollow, he found a perfectly circular section of very hard material that appeared to be porcelain. Okay. And in the center of the porcelain was like a 2-millimeter shaft of bright metal. And the metal responded to a magnet. They had a geologist come look at this thing, and they did some tests on it. And the geologist examined the artifact and said that the shells that were encrusting the outside of this geode or rock or whatever it was, it would have taken 500,000 years to attain its present form. Now, what they think was in this rock was a spark plug.
Wait a second.
You know, like a spark plug that you see all the time, the white porcelain part.
Did they finish cutting the rock open, or how did they know it was porcelain?
Well, right. Evidently, they ruined the first saw blade.
They stopped.
They knew something was wrong. It's not a geode. They don't know. And then I guess they finished it by cutting it in half because there's pictures on the internet of it.
Okay, like X-rays of it or CAT scans.
Yeah, they
they
X-rayed it. You know, and they've got pictures of it, and they've had it looked at, and yeah, I mean, it looks like a spark plug. But the problem is, just like all these other artifacts, the rock that's encrusting the thing, it would have taken 500,000
years old.
Yeah. So, is it an alien spark plug? Was it a time traveler? I don't know.
I've got it answered right there. It fell out of the DeLorean.
It's right. It's
crazy.
crazy.
Marty McFly dropped it.
I'm going to put pictures of all this on the website. But man, you know, that one is always my favorite because it doesn't make any sense.
It makes no sense. I don't even know what.
I mean, how is that possible?
I don't know. That's. I guess that's the reason I ask if they had X-rayed it or really.
Yeah, they've X-rayed.
If they cut some of the. Did they end up cutting the rest of the geode away so they could actually study what it was?
Yes, no, they didn't break it out of the rock, but it's
still in the rock.
It's sawed completely in half, and you can see both halves. And it looks like a donut size porcelain with a small metal rod through the middle,
surrounded in porcelain.
Right.
So it's a geode with a porcelain wrapped rod in the center of it.
Right.
And that's not naturally occurring by any means.
And when they x-rayed it, you can see it. I mean, it looks like it even has like the threads of a bolt on one end and everything. I mean,
where the hell did that come?
Well, that's the part of the argument. A lot of people say, well, it's not that old, that rocks can form in certain instances very quickly. It could be like 100 years old. Mm-hmm. But, the one geologist that they had looked at it said there's no way. This stuff, I mean, there's like fossilized shells and stuff on the outside that's encrusted to it. I don't know. Like I said, I'm not a geologist. That's a fascinating story.
That is a hell of a story. Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Number 2.
Was that number 1? That's your favorite one?
No, it's not my favorite one.
4?
Number 4 would probably be my favorite one.
Okay, so we started at number 4. We're going to number 1.
That's okay.
Okay, so you're on number 3 basically now.
Okay.
We're counting up to the top one. Okay, so number 3.
Number 3 is the Aluminum Wedge of Aiud.
Now here comes those cool names again. Aiud.
Well, I don't know how you
this
pronounce
come
it.
from?
Okay, in 1974 in Romania, 2 kilometers east of Aiud, a group of workers on the banks of the river Mureș discovered 3 buried objects in the sand.
Okay.
2 of the objects turned out to be mastodon bones.
Oh, kick ass.
Millions of years old, okay? The 3rd object was a block of metal, similar in some respects to the head of a hammer. It was roughly 8 inches long, about 5 inches wide, and 3 inches tall. Now, they took this metal object and they sent it off to have it studied, at the Institute of Metals in Romania. Mm-hmm. And it's composed of an alloy of extremely complex metal. It's made up of 12 different elements. 89% of the elements, 89% of it was aluminum. Aluminum is not found in nature. It's combined with other minerals and materials, and we've only been able to do that in the last 100 years or so. So if this thing's laying next to mastodon bones from millions of years ago.
Now, they claim it came from the same strata, correct?
Yeah, it's exactly the same strata. It was all found together. What the heck is this aluminum wedge doing here? Right? So now, crazy, ancient aliens again.
Yeah.
They say it's probably a landing gear or a piece of a landing gear from a spacecraft. But here again, what the hell is this thing doing next to millions of years old mastodon bones?
The first thing I think of is that if it was found on the banks of a river, it's something that washed and tumbled and washed into the same strata as the mastodon bones. Maybe they all washed together from another area years ago, and then it's just kind of piled up. It's hard to say. I mean, I understand how they're trying to tie to it. But if it's not, then what does that tell you? Well, that it tells me that mankind is hundreds of thousands of years older.
Exactly.
The same as this Coso spark plug. Yeah.
Well, just like we've talked about privately and on previous podcasts, I mean, this could be another indicator that mankind was here before the last deluge, before the last flood, pre-flood,
pre-ice age.
Pre-ice age, had the technology to forge aluminum, and this was, just a piece of something that had to be built, We always assume that, we're the smartest that mankind's ever reached, and maybe that's just not true. Maybe there was a whole bunch of us here a long time ago, and for whatever reason.
Multiple rises and falls, maybe?
Yeah. So that's another great one, right?
Yeah, that's a cool one right there, really.
Right. Now, Aiud is A-I-U-D. So if you want to search it up, I'll put links to it, but it's called the Aluminum Wedge of Aiud.
That's pretty cool.
The next one, I know you've heard of this one because I know you're a Philip Coppens fan, and I know you've read some of his books. The Antikythera Device.
Yes, I do. I enjoyed, They've actually done several studies on that for sure.
Right. Now, the Antikythera Device is a really neat one. I mean, it's, like the world's first computer, they call it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, in 1900, a Greek sponge diver named Ilias Stadiatos, working off the small Greek island of Antikythera, found the remains of a sunken Greek ship at the bottom of the sea. The wreck was about 50 meters long and was located in about 43 meters of water. They found, tons of stuff in the wreckage. They found marble and bronze statues, gold and jewelry, and all kinds of other artifacts, and they were all dated to about 1st century BC. Mm-hmm. Well, all the items were donated to the Museum of Athens, and they were just left there, Well, about 2 or 3 years later, while sorting through some of the material, a man named Valerio Stais noticed a calcified lump of bronze that looked like a big watch. No one knew what it was, so he went around, what the heck is this? Nobody knew. Well, in 1958, This was years later. A Yale science historian, Derek De Sola Price, stumbled upon the object again, and he decided to make it a subject of a scientific study. Okay, so he was working on a book. And De Sola stated, "Nothing like this instrument is preserved elsewhere. Nothing comparable to it is known from any ancient scientific text or literary allusion. On the contrary, from all that we know of science and technology in the Hellenistic age, we should have felt that such a device could not have ever existed." I mean, then he concluded that the object was both dials on the inside and the outside. It had a series of gears inside of it. This thing was like the size of our mixing board, like the size of a medium-sized suitcase, I guess. Mm-hmm. And it was calcified, of course, and it had all kinds of gears and stuff. There was at least 20 gear wheels that were preserved, including a sophisticated assembly of gears that were mounted eccentrically on a turntable. The device also contained a differential gear, permitting two shafts to rotate at different speeds. As to its purpose, the mechanism appeared to have been a device for calculating the motions of stars and planets, a working model of the solar system. So, I mean,
it sounds like when we were talking about earlier with the sailors, the ancient sailors being able to sail, that almost sounds like maybe not even that, but also like a timekeeping device also as well.
But yeah, and this thing is very complicated, okay, and very precise, it says here that the study also revealed some of the complexity of the engineering that had gone into this device. The moon sometimes moves slightly faster in the sky than at others because of the satellite's elliptical orbit. To overcome this, the designer would have had to use a pin and slot mechanism to connect the two gears and wheels that introduced the necessary variations. So the designer of this thing was very knowledgeable about the speed that the moon and all the other things. He knew that there was on elliptics. That's the craziest thing is this is a high-tech device. Yeah. It says here, and finally it says, the discovery of the Antikythera Device led to one gigantic realization, that our everyday clock started as an astronomical showpiece that happened to also indicate the time, and not vice versa, as most of us believed half a century ago. Gradually, the timekeeping functions of the clocks became more important, and the device that showed the cycles of heaven became subsidiary, only to be forgotten and then once reinvented all over again. So they're thinking that this thing, of course it kept time, but it did so much more than that. It was able to map out the movement of the planets in the solar system, the cycles of the seasons. It was able to map out, and all this thing. This was on a first century wreck, BC. Mm-hmm. So how old is this device pre that?
Yeah, exactly. Where did it come from?
Right.
Or where did the technology to build it come from?
Exactly.
And that's almost like people would always, you try to speculate of how would you guide yourself on the ocean whenever there was an overcast skies, stormy skies. How would you know where you were going? Well, with this device here, maybe in some way it actually made it easier.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I don't know the answer to that question. What do you do when it's like that? You just wait till the sun comes out again?
I saw that there was a guy that actually rebuilt it. He actually built one of them.
Well, they have a couple reproductions. I think they said that there's one in England, and I think that they said that there's one in Wyoming or somewhere like that.
The heck's it doing in Wyoming?
Well, no, the reproductions.
Yeah, what the heck's it doing up there? There's not any water around that thing. Somebody just sitting in their backyard watching the stars and the sun go by?
Well, I don't know. But I'm just telling you where that.
Can we get a copy of it? Where's that 3D printer?
There you go.
3D printer. I want one of those printed out.
Well, that's how they know about the inner workings of it is through
they used a 3D printer,
X-ray technology, because it's so calcified and rusted. They can't open
for real.
Okay,
hit me with number one.
Yeah,
baby.
My favorite one, and this is probably just because it's local, and I know you know this one. The London Hammer.
Somehow I had a feeling that this was going to make it on the list. The London Hammer
reminds me a lot of the Coso Artifact. How the Coso Artifact was a spark plug, left with all this rock and stone surrounding it. The London Hammer is about the same thing. In June 1936, Max Hahn and his wife Emma were hiking along the Red Creek near London, Texas. It was there that they discovered an artifact which seemed completely out of place. They found a unique piece of wood protruding from a rock concretion. When they they had their son come and break the rock around this handle sticking out. And when he broke the rock, it revealed that there was an iron hammer with a wooden handle buried in the rock. Okay, do you understand that?
Yeah, exactly. So the rock is encasing this whole thing. The only thing you could see was the wooden handle sticking.
Yes.
In
In 1983, Carl Ball, a creationist, purchased the artifact and promoted it as a monumental pre-flood discovery. The rock encompassing the hammer was dated to between 400 and 500 million years old. Wrap your head around that.
Yeah.
So there's this hammer. I guess it's like a roofing hammer, a large roofing hammer. It's not a sledgehammer. It's not a little tiny hammer for, hanging a picture on your wall. This is like a large roofing hammer. And it's got an iron head on it. It's got a handle. And this thing is encapsulated in this stone.
I'm going to touch on a few things that I've read when I was first reading about that artifact.
Sure.
Number one was the fact that the iron in the hammerhead is almost 99% pure, which is more pure than any iron that we have today. So they don't know how they made that. Also, too, in the handle itself, part of the handle was turning into coal whenever they broke it out of that stone.
Really?
That was part of the wood that was in it was turning into coal. Now, they were people that were trying to scoff and poo-poo this whole thing.
Well, exactly. All these artifacts I mentioned, there's people that are coming out of the woodwork trying to explain to it. If you throw a hammer and it's in a certain type of mud and clay,
that's exactly
it can bake
right.
in 10 years, but come on, man.
Well, what they were saying was because of the iron, that it would attract certain minerals that would cause it to encase itself on the flowing water from that river. Now, I don't know. No geologist here. I don't have any idea. But I do know that if it is true that handle was turning to coal, nothing causes wood to turn to coal except time.
Right.
It doesn't matter. I don't give a damn what you float it in, what you roll it in. Certain minerals aren't going to leach into it from a river and turn the handle into coal.
Well, right. Okay, so there's a large portion of people on this earth that think that human beings have only been here for 6,000 years.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you explain a hammer that's encased in stone that's 400 to 500 million years old?
That's the date alone is the thing that blows me away. It's the dating alone. It's the one thing to say that it's like the Antikythera Device. It's one thing to say that, hey, that was the turning of the years. We're not really sure.
Or the Coso Artifact, 500,000 years.
Yeah.
But when you say 400 and 500 million.
500,000 years ago was ridiculously long ago, but you're right. When you start saying 400 or 500 million years, that is, I can't fathom that. I really can't. I cannot.
The heck? Oh, your computer?
What the heck was that? I really can't wrap my head around it.
No.
I cannot. I can't. I don't know. I really don't know.
That's why I like these things.
I'm so
they don't make any
fascinated by
sense.
them. Yeah. I'm so fascinated by it but yeah, you're 99% pure iron and coal in the handle. If that's all true. Now, just down here south of us, down around Granbury, whenever you start talking about where they have the tracks.
Oh, in Glenrose.
In Glenrose.
Yeah.
When they start having I've actually heard that there were tracks found down there with human footprints in them.
Right.
Now,
dinosaur tracks with a human footprint in the track.
Yes. I've never been down there to see it.
Really?
Hell, I haven't
seen that. I've been down there and seen the tracks.
I've seen the dinosaur tracks. Yeah. I've been down there several times, but I've never seen the alleged human in the dinosaur tracks.
You know what's also
neat
check
that out.
About Glenrose, other than the dinosaur footprints and all the stuff down there.
Is it's close to Granbury and there's a Babe's Chicken in Granbury?
Well, of course. But their county courthouse down there used to have on display the bones of a giant.
A female giant.
Yeah.
Yep.
I don't think it's there anymore.
It's not there.
And unfortunately, I wasn't aware of giants till 10 years ago.
Yeah. That's going to be something. That might be. I tell you who we need to get a hold of, too. We need to interview Josh Reeves.
Yeah, man, about the rock wall.
Yeah, well, we're talking, you've worked all around there and we've all been over there for wrestling meets and everything else. So that would really be a good interview.
Well, and there's been other people that have hit me up about different interviews. Brian, again, he was talking about the Black-Eyed Kids.
With David Weatherly.
Yeah, I've sent a couple emails. I haven't heard nothing back. Some people are really quick to do an interview with us, and then some people are harder to get a hold of. They're very busy.
Especially around here towards the end of the year.
So, what I'm trying to say is I don't want people to think that we're ignoring certain subjects. When there's certain things, I don't really know a whole lot about it. I'd rather talk to a specialist.
Yes.
Like when we had Linda on.
Yes.
Okay, I don't really know anything about dog men. it's not my area of expertise.
You don't know really? You don't know? I mean, come on now. We don't know anything about that. Neither one of us know anything about that.
Right.
That was a really wild one. Yeah.
Everybody, thank you again for listening to us.
Yeah. Thank you so much. We hope you enjoyed this episode. This is just me and Kyle kind of hanging out, being ourselves.
Yeah, we didn't have any
stuff
interviews
we
this week,
enjoyed.
so we just put together some stories that we thought would be entertaining.
Stuff that we enjoyed. Thanks to all the veterans that are listening and all the ones that
Absolutely.
have served or will serve.
Thank
and
you
have
for your
served.
service. Yes.
Thanks. Thanks so much for making this fun. We have really enjoyed doing it. We're going to be here doing it from now on.
Yes, thank you for
guys.
those that have written new reviews on Apple for us.
Yes.
I don't have it in front of me. We'll get it out of the next show. Please follow the website, www.expandedperspectives.com.
Mm-hmm.
Follow us on Facebook, on Twitter. You can find us almost everywhere that you would think.
Yeah.
I mean, social media.
We're around.
Yeah. Email the show.
Yeah, email us.
expandedperspectives
Yeah,
at
you bet.
yahoo.com. Me and Cam, we love to hear from people.
And we're back with Expanded Perspectives Classic Rewind. I hope you enjoyed that episode. That was pretty cool. I like the stories of these rock apes living in the jungles of Vietnam, while these soldiers were fighting. It's a pretty cool story. I've heard other stories from the Vietnam War. One was of like a green dragon lady flying through the skies at night. Also kind of reminds me of the Indava bird, like when we were talking with Paul Nation. Strange sightings deep within Southeast Asia. Very cool. It seems like there's a lot of stories associated with wars, whether it's the Vietnam War, the World War II, World War I. Might have to do a special episode on stuff like that. All right, that's just about all the time we have for this episode. I want to thank everybody for listening to Expanded Perspectives, for following us and helping us out. We really couldn't do the show without you guys and you wonderful people. If you want to help us out even more, don't forget about Expanded Perspectives Elite. You have to go over to the website, expandedperspectives.com, scroll down to the Elite tab, click on that, and signing up is pretty easy. It's $5 a month, and with that $5, you'll get extra content every month, some months more than others, and you'll get access to our entire back catalog, almost 240 episodes at this point. And so if you're asking yourself, do you like Expanded Perspectives? And the answer is yes, then you're going to like Expanded Perspectives Elite. They're about an hour long, just like the normal show. No ads or anything like that and stuff like that because it's not re-aired on any radio networks. And you'll be helping me and Cam out. That money really is used for research materials. We have to constantly buy books and things like that to keep digging up these stories. So it really does help. Like we always say, we couldn't do the show without you. If you have any stories you want to share with me and Cam and the listeners, you can email the show, expandedperspectives@yahoo.com. You can call the show, 888-393-2783. That's 888-393-BRUD. And don't forget to write and rate us on iTunes or any other podcatcher. And don't forget about going over to YouTube and subscribing over there. We're trying to build a big audience over there too. I hope everybody out there has a good weekend. Stay safe. Till next time, I'm Kyle. Peace.